Hello everyone. Welcome to our inaugural session of our webinar series, FinTalks Live in Jordan. First of all, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Faisal Al Ahmed, and I'm the current personnel leading the Jordan Fintech Bay project. So I'm here based out of Jordan to lead and launch the operations of Jordan Fintech Bay. Jordan Fintech Bay is a fintech ecosystem builder. We look at building and foster synergies amongst key market players in order to implement and empower the fintech ecosystem. We look at our services vary from business development, working with the financial institutions and startups, looking at launching initiatives catered towards the talent empowerment, research and thought leadership, and etc. So if you're interested, please find out more or feel free to go to our website. Part of our initiatives is it's a webinar series, FinTalks. FinTalks is a webinar series featuring trending topics and joining or collectively discussing with prominent speakers from our Fintech Bay ecosystem. Today, we'll be having two brightest individuals in the fintech ecosystem, starting with Faisal Al Bitar. Faisal Al Bitar is the Innovation Hub Manager and Head of AB Accelerator at Arab Bank. Prior to joining Arab Bank, Faisal managed a portfolio of 30 startups at Oasis 500, a pioneering seed stage accelerator in the MENA region with a portfolio of 100 companies. Our second speaker for today is Engineer Nasser Saleh. Nasser Saleh is the Executive Chairman and founder of MadfoatCom. In 2017, he was awarded the King Abdullah II bin Al Hussein Medal of Distinguished Excellence for MadfoatCom project. He was also awarded Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Award in UAE for the Best Service Project category in the Arab world in Dubai in 2018. Apart from that, Engineer Nasser was also selected as the Endeavor Entrepreneur in 2014, a member of the American Entrepreneurs Organizations in Jordan, won the EY Entrepreneur of the Year Award for 2013, and he has been awarded the Queen Rania National Entrepreneurship back in 2012. So for today's topic, we'll be highlighting more about the rise of fintech ecosystem in the MENA region, specifically more towards the Jordan chapter. So to start with, the fintech market in MENA basically is growing rapidly. And that's something we've been noticed way back since the start of the first Jordan Fintech Bay we have back in 2018 in Bahrain. The growth is propelled by the rising fintech startups in many regions, the growth of the Islamic banking industry and increasing internet and mobile phone usage. Another major factor that is several traditional banks are undergoing through digital transformation in order to reach more customers and compete with fintechs, and all of this is catapulted further during the global pandemic of COVID-19. In this discussion, we'll be exploring this journey. So my first question goes to Faisal Al Bitar. And Faisal, can you please tell us more about the fintech ecosystem in MENA in general?
Great. Thank you, Faisal, for having me, and thank you, Fintech Bay, for hosting this. And to talk about a little bit more about the fintech ecosystem, maybe I'm going to take one step back and talk more about the why and what has been really driving this. If you look at the MENA countries in the region, economic diversification has really been the top of their agenda. Historically, as a region, we've been highly dependent on natural resources. And that, as we go forward, is starting to be, we're reducing our resilience on that. And we're moving more towards a serviced and knowledge-based economy where really R&D innovation becomes a key driver to our growth. And in order to continue that growth and to see that going forward, fintech in MENA is relatively nascent, yet we're seeing ample growth. And that ample growth is really dependent on favorable fundamentals, like you mentioned, Faisal. The customer demographics in the region has among the youngest in the world. 40% of the population is under the age of 40. If I look at Jordan, 70% of the population is under the age of 30. Two, customers in the region itself are highly digitalized and tech savvy. We have the highest internet penetration levels, as well as you mentioned, Faisal, increase in smartphone penetration. Again, looking at Jordan has more than 90% of the population with smartphones. If we look at subsectors that are driving fintech, and it's very important to mention that fintech is very interconnected. And for various industries to grow, fintech really becomes the infrastructure. And one of the most important industries to talk about, which we're seeing as well a rapid growth, is the e-commerce. We've witnessed tremendous growth, especially with the strict lockdown imposed in the region. This has really shifted the culture and customer behavior. And for e-commerce, really predominantly for this to actually enable and grow fintech as an infrastructure and payments is a key pillar. With that as well, if we look at the overall market, there's a lack of financial inclusion among both consumers and SMEs. Countries like Jordan and Egypt, banking penetration is around 40%. So I believe all these fundamentals really open tremendous lines of opportunities for MENA and Jordan to become a fertile ground for the fintech opportunities. Going in parallel, I think what we've seen over the years, since the exit of Maktoub, we've seen a growth of online entrepreneurs and VC investments in the ecosystem, and particularly looking at technology, but as well in the fintech. And that has also increased the rapid appetite of investors. In total, fintech startups in the region have raised over $500 million. Fintech received the highest investment sector in MENA in 2019. And if I look at 2012, not long ago when MadfoatCom was initiated, there has been an annual growth rate of more than 39%. Today, we have more than 310 fintech startups in the MENA region. Around 7% of these actually reside in Jordan. And that as well is really being led by the increase of international interest, right? If you look at regional success stories like Kareem and Souk, recently InstaShop was acquired by Deliveroo for $360 million. These are all successful stories that are driving entrepreneurs to start business, but as well driving investors to come and invest. And I think there's also worth mentioning two notable investments, exits and investments in the fintech industry. One was led by Majd Al Futtaim, which they acquired Beam Wallet, a mobile commerce and rewards platform. And the second one is Fawri, which is the electronics payments company in Egypt. They IPO'd last year and became the first company in Egypt to reach a market cap of over $1 billion. The stock price has increased by over 300%. So really, these success stories will help the whole industry open up to new doors for fintech to receive funds and make exits. And this is how you nurture the ecosystem and drive more online entrepreneurs to start operating and really identifying certain needs in the market that are required. I think as well, we talked about the demographics, we talked about the online entrepreneurs, the investments. I think a very important component to touch upon is the regulatory landscape that we're seeing here in the MENA. Regulation, and most importantly to say, is really an enabler. And that really is a sentiment to what we saw internationally. If you look at progressive regulations, have been single-handedly contributed to the fintech growth in the UK and Singapore. These countries have become the leading fintech hubs due to the progressive regulations. These growth of hubs have actually paved the new innovations that we're seeing, like open banking in Europe, which gave birth to digital banks like Monzo, Revolut, and N26 that consumers now are very much enthused about. That's why it's important having a regulatory framework, because without these frameworks, fintechs cannot exist. They'll operate in gray areas, but really the ripe of innovation and growth is quite limited. So it's very important. And I think looking into the region, we've been seeing an increased level of government support that has really been a strong foundation for the industry. Governments are now understanding that they need to play a much faster and much aggressive role in really making the regulatory landscape easier to navigate, allowing easy access to funding, which if we look at Jordan, the ISSF, the National Startup and SME Fund, launched a 100 million fund focused on funds of funds and direct investments. And then lastly, and we'll go more in details along this talk, is launching the regulatory sandboxes, which enables a safe environment for the fintechs to come in and to start innovating.
Excellent. And speaking of Jordan, what kind of fintech verticals you started to see emerging out of this industry?
So generally, when I say Jordan and the region, we're more of a trend follower than a trend setter, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of what we see in Jordan is really mirrored to what we've seen globally. Payments and remittance is still the predominantly number one industry. Again, it goes back to what we talked about in terms of e-commerce and the growth of e-commerce. As well, we've seen startups like MadfoatCom, Hyperpay have really shifted the industry when it comes to payments. Remittance as well is generally, I think, is I would say an industry that is still not fully tapped. And the reasons are because it's predominantly dominated by large international companies who charge high fees and non-convenient methods. And I think there's a huge opportunity for fintech startups to come into that space, especially that we're seeing. I think in 2015 there was more than, if I'm not mistaken, more than 10 million that has been actually inward and outward of the country in terms of remittance. So that really gives an opportunity for fintech companies to come in. I think in parallel to that, and what we talked about, you know, the black swan, the COVID, with e-commerce, there comes new opportunities of alternative payments, really enabling small businesses to start accepting credit card payments in store or at a omni-channel aspect. So we saw startups like POS Rocket offering really a cloud-based point of system that is more conventional, that is migrating from the conventional cash register. As well, I predict we're going to see much more payment functionalities that are focused for social commerce. Being that now a lot of your brick and mortar and small, medium businesses, your mom and shops are migrating online, they will require new types of solutions that helps them not only accept payments, but as well accessing funding and many more. I think in line of that and in line of e-commerce, an industry that we are quite excited about is the buy now, pay later industry, which is providing a line of credit to consumers at the checkout, really allowing the customer to pay for a product over installments. We haven't seen much in Jordan. However, we know a lot of players are, from larger players to fintech, are coming into that space. But we believe that this is a space that we're going to see a relatively overcrowded of players coming in and offering it. This could be focused players in the buy now, pay later, or it could be your actual marketplaces teaming up with banks and other solutions and introducing that.
And this is more towards what we're seeing trending or the upcoming lineup of the next wave of fintech verticals coming into the market. Excellent. Going back more towards the most, or going back to, let's say, the most centered or the current ongoing fintech verticals that are happening, which is in the mobile payment or the payment space. A key example that you mentioned is MadfoatCom, whereby we do have Engineer Nasser over here. Mohandas Nasser or Engineer Nasser, can you tell us more about MadfoatCom per se, and how did it start and what is currently going ahead, or the directions of it?
Thank you, Faisal. MadfoatCom started in 2011 in Jordan as a startup incubated at Oasis 500 with the aim to disrupt cash payments. As you know, Jordan and many other countries in the region are more of cash-based countries where people like to pay in cash. So we started with building a platform to connect the billers and merchants with the banks and mobile wallets, or let's say payment service providers, to provide end customers with the ability to inquire and pay any type of bill, like utilities, telecoms, universities, any other payments. So we were lucky that the Central Bank of Jordan A few years after we started, and we got like interest from few banks and few billers. The central bank was already having a plan to digitize the payments in Jordan, and they issued a tender after we connected like few banks and few billers to build and operate the national electronic bill presentment and payment service, which is called MENA in Jordan. We won that tender in 2014, and that was like a major milestone for MadfoatCom. And we faced the challenge to switch from a startup to a corporate, because you know now working with central bank in general, any central bank, it means that you will be heavily regulated and dealing with terms that you did not deal with before, like AML, you know, and all other stuff. So that was very good experience for us. So the challenge that we had, which we successfully managed, and we are still trying to keep this spirit of becoming a solid, robust corporate, but in the same time still have the startup spirit and the innovation to continue within the company. So we launched MENA in 2014. And from that date till date, we connected all banks in Jordan, all mobile wallets, and many what you call it, payment service providers. And on the other side, we connected currently around 300 billers who have really more than 700 services. So today in Jordan, any citizen or resident in Jordan can pay hundreds of services, not necessarily bills. We call it MENA, but it's really any type of bill. So they are paying government fees, utilities, telecoms, school fees, even e-commerce, like Faisal mentioned, which we saw a good, what you call it, interest during the COVID-19 lockdown from schools and the e-commerce. So they started to connect with MENA so that they really reduce their cash on delivery and go more into the e-payments. So MENA today became the national platform for the whole country. And the good thing, it's open really for all players. So we have new fintech companies and even startups that we are proud to connect to our platform, and we share the revenue with. So it's like becoming an ecosystem for the other fintech players. And we are very proud of that.
Excellent, excellent. Just to follow up on the success of MadfoatCom, and beside the market opportunity that was available for you, and what Faisal was mentioning, the investments and the ISSF, which is the Innovative Startups and SME Fund that came into the market, what do you think are the key factors or the strength points of Jordan in general for any other startups that are interested for our speakers today, the local entrepreneurs who are looking at having indigenous startups, or from our regional speakers who are strategically or opportunistically looking to explore Jordan? What do you think Jordan has to offer, I'd say?
I believe in Jordan, not because I'm living in Jordan, but we have really many good factors for any fintech startup to start in Jordan, starting with access to resources. So we have very good technical engineers, and that's why you have sometimes international companies are opening in Jordan, like Amazon, for example, Expedia, and many other companies that they have their kitchen or development centers in Jordan. So for any startup, you know, the first thing you want is really a very strong team. So luckily we have a very good pool of resources in Jordan. Also, you know, the environment, it's the location geographically, Jordan is like in the center of in the Arab world, between the East and the West. Plus also the, what you call it, regulations are really, I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's enhancing. And one very good reference or story is really our story. When we approached the Central Bank of Jordan, I was having, what you call it, the impression that either they will shut us down or we will try to run away from them to other country. So, but I took that step and decided to meet them. So I was very impressed when I saw the plans they had really to digitize the payments in Jordan. That's why if you look at the payment, or not the payment, let's say the central bank in the last few years, many systems were launched. I mean, MadfoatCom, Jomo Pay, ACH, the new instant payment system, which is now launched by JOPAC, which is the payment arm for the central bank. So we are really lucky in terms of regulations. Also, from the other side, the government, always governments are really slow. But when it comes to Jordan, it's really much better. I hope the private sector will not be mad from me, but sometimes they are faster than the private sector. Actually, that was really against the assumptions that I put when I started the business. I thought that the private sector will be connected to MadfoatCom before the government sector. But if you look at the statistics, the government were first to connect, and even some of them really decided to close their, cash boxes and stop cash payments 3-4 years ago. And it was a very successful experience. Then the private sector followed really the government sector. So this is not to say that the government is really great here in Jordan in terms of regulations. Still, there's a very big room for enhancement, but I have to be fair. It's a very good environment for fintech startups to start in Jordan.
I personally think, so we have one question, and Faisal, I think this question mostly goes to you. Before just going to the question, I think the national push by the government of Jordan towards digitalization and digital transformation journey, it's all started by restructuring an existing ministry and renaming it to the Ministry of Digital Economy and Entrepreneurship. One where it boosts the digital transformation journey, also in a way supports the existing or anyone who has the enthusiasm to become an entrepreneur. And I think that is one big push that the government of Jordan putting in. And I think many also to follow with several initiatives that are in lineup, and they'll be discussing a bit more. So just with our late joiners, I'd say, if you have any questions, Q&A, feel free to go in the tab below for the Q&A section and write down your question. We'll be answering it as we move forward in discussion. I'd also like to remind you that the final bit of the session is the actual Q&A. So feel free, write down your question and then ask us later, or you can just we'll ask, or we'll try to answer it in the most relevant time. So Faisal, we got one question from one of the attendees. What is the most popular fintech trend in Jordan, particularly this year with the pandemic that you see that's being raised up?
So I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I definitely see solutions like alternative payments or alternative lending that are either supporting the growth of e-commerce or offering customers installments to actually purchase on e-commerce stores. Those are going to be quite popular. We are seeing a lot of migration from your mom and pop shops setting up to your social commerce stores. So these stores will require a payment infrastructure. Eventually, as they start to accept payments, they will require to increase their business. This is where alternative lending can come into place based on cash flow, where now they can be offered instant loans to increase their business. So I think these are specific areas. I think another area worth mentioning is more on the fintech on the B2B side, where, as we know, because of the pandemic, banks need to increase their innovations. So banks have, and in Jordan, you can see have been launching different digital solutions into the market. But I think time to market is now in essence. And this is what COVID really taught us well, right? Digitization is a must. And now we're seeing a lot of new fintechs, maybe outside of Jordan, that are supporting banks in digitizing. If it's enabling them to launch their own wealth management solutions or solutions on the corporate side. So I definitely see I definitely see that there's an appetite here in the market. We have not yet seen startups upcoming here in Jordan, but I definitely see startups from outside of Jordan coming into Jordan. And I think I just want to highlight, Jordan, when I talk about fintech, let's look at the broader spectrum of the region, right? There's a lot of similarities. The biggest differences are the regulatory bodies. There is a lot of fragmentation when it comes to regulations in between different countries. However, the sandbox environment that we have today here in Jordan enables these international companies to come in and set up their operations. That way, I believe we're going to start seeing more access of international fintech companies looking into the region and implementing their service. Maybe one more trend to highlight and something that we're quite enthused about is RegTech. And this is not just on Jordan, but in Jordan and the region as well. I mean, with the mass generation of people moving online, the exchange of data, this really imposes a significant cybersecurity and privacy risk to consumers, businesses, and financial institutions. So I believe RegTech, which is regulation tech, will really pave the way going forward. We've invested in a startup called Sacletics, Jordanian founder based out of San Francisco, that specializes in detection zero-day cyber threats and enhancement aggregation. And that's why we're quite bullish about this industry, and I believe that this specific industry will also see growth going forward.
So Faisal, this question goes to you. So you have the market advantages or the strengths of the Jordan ecosystem. You see a national push that's being driven by the government of Jordan. You have prominent startups like MadfoatCom, not only looking at the growth, expand, but ongoing, enhancing their technology, their offering, but also opening their floors to collaborate with existing startups. What are the private sector doing, especially from the financial services institutions, as a key way of working? As the Jordan Fintech Bay, we're always looking at building an end-to-end cycle for a fintech journey that is either looking at to establish locally or coming from abroad, and how we can, you as a bank coming from the financial institutions, can open the floor and collaborate with the fintech startups.
Yeah, great question, Faisal. I think you'll see that over the years, banks have been quite more active in the financial industry. Some banks have taken different types of strategy, and I don't believe there's a one size fits all. But you've seen strategies where banks have been focused on just building their own digital solutions and launching to the market. Other strategies have been on buying, and then others on collaborating. I think for us as Arab Bank, we've set up two main pillars, AB iHub and AB Accelerator. These two main pillars really primarily focus on collaboration with the external ecosystem. Under AB iHub, we do rapid prototypization, prototypes. With that rapid prototype, we actually collaborate with the fintech ecosystem. We've done a number of boot camps really to provide idea validation and mentorship support for early fintech startups. We've also launched last year an open banking API platform that really enables the fintech ecosystem to come and start testing these APIs in a sandbox environment. These are as well, we've seen similar initiatives from different banks in Jordan and outside of Jordan go in that similar approach. The other pillar that we've launched is AB Accelerator. And AB Accelerator is the program that primarily focuses on accelerating the adoption of emerging technology solutions into Arab Bank's network. And if you think about it, it's really a fast track process for startups to start building partnerships with the bank. And what we primarily offer and focus on is a proof of concept, allowing the startups to actually validate their product market fit within our own environment that is safeguarded and under the bank's license. And I think that's quite critical because as we talked about regulation, if there's no regulatory framework, then startups cannot exist. Some do exist in the gray area, but really do not see struggle at times or unable to grow. And that's why I think banks should enable their environments and collaborate with the fintechs, because what the fintechs bring in, what they bring into the industry is a lot of agility and innovation. And the banks have the licenses, the customer, and the industry expertise. And when you collaborate these, that's where you start to get true innovation. We also do offer investments. And we've, as I mentioned, we've invested in a company called Sacletics. We've also invested in a company called Addenda, that's an insurtech company focused on digitizing and supporting insurance to digitize their journeys. And I think we didn't touch upon insurance, but I think insurance as well. I see it's a hot industry going forward because insurance companies have been slower to digitize than financial industries, right? So there's a lot of potential opportunities as well there. And maybe the last component of what we've been offering as part of Arab Bank is the scalability. Today, Arab Bank has a network of over 13 banking licenses with a majority presence in the MENA region. And we understand that one of the biggest difficulties that fintech companies have is scaling due to the fragmentation and regulation. And this is where we want to work with the fintech companies and helping them scale to new markets by leveraging our regional and international network, as well as helping them set up operations in different countries. Today, we have an innovation hub in Jordan. End of this year, we hopefully will be launching one in Egypt and the UAE. That way to build that interconnectivity of supporting fintech startups and growing and scaling outside the market. We haven't seen yet anyone on the buying spectrum. I think this is more on a global trend. You've seen Goldman Sachs play quite an active role in purchasing multiple of startups to increase their consumer presence. But we're seeing as well, maybe before the buying earlier, it's the venture growth of the venture investments. As well, we've established a venture fund here at Arab Bank called AB Ventures that focuses on investing in companies that have achieved product market fit and are scaling. And we're seeing more and more corporate venture capital funds that we believe will pop out here in Jordan and in the outside region.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that. Engineer Nasser, now this question goes to you. So we have the talent, you have the government push, you have the private sector contribution. Can you elaborate more or tell us more, at least on the, let's say the fifth or the fourth pillar when it comes to organizations that being established in Jordan catered towards empowering local startups and entrepreneurs and attracting internationals? From your perspective, are they a benefit or could be a negative, or there's a further down the side? Also with the increase of these numbers of organizations that are looking at empowering local startups, where do you see an end to it, or where do you see the final stop of these organizations?
I think this point is very important. Again, we are lucky that we have really many organizations to support startups. Like I told you, we started with Oasis 500, and there are now plenty of incubators, accelerators. Banks are doing very good role, especially for the fintech, like Arab Bank and many other banks are really incubating startups and opening their doors for startups to work them. Also, the three telecom companies in Jordan are also having their incubators and accelerators. I think having plenty of them, it's not a negative thing. It's really very good. I mean, if I'm really today an entrepreneur with an idea, the more I have such places, the really more options that I will have. So for example, if my product or my startup is within the fintech or within the banking, for example, I can go to any let's say organizations that's linked to a bank, so that really they give me like a sandbox or the opportunity to work with me and partner with me. When we started in 2011, we were not that lucky. I mean, none of the banks had really such incubators or accelerators, but at the same time, they were very cooperative and opening their doors to us. So I think the startups here in Jordan and entrepreneurs mainly are really very lucky to that. And I always advise my colleagues, the new entrepreneurs, I tell them, be greedy as much as you can. Apply to all of them. I mean, okay, apply to Arab Bank and the other banks. Don't tell Arab Bank that you are going to other banks, but try to maximize the benefit that you get from all these incubators.
And what about the organizations and associations that we started to see an increase of them in here? What would you elaborate on them?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
So what about the associations and organizations that in the market, majority fall under the umbrella of an NGO, so basically, and an NPO, so basically they're not for profit and just looking at empowering the local startups to increase their network session. Basically, these are the ones that are catered looking after, let's say, the pre-MVP, the early seed and seed stage of fintechs or startups in general.
Yeah, again, we have very good ecosystem when it comes to that also. And like I told you, when I talk to my colleagues, the other entrepreneurs, they are benefiting really from these associations. You know, it's always good to, as an entrepreneur, to work also with NGOs because they will not really have any, what do you call it, conflict of interest when it comes to giving you the advice or the needed knowledge or education. So yeah, I think again, from this point of view, we have very good resources in Jordan.
Excellent. As well, what's really interesting about these organizations, associations that are being created, usually on a corporate governance structure, it's always followed by participation from the private sector, from the financial institutions. At some, you'd also see a collaboration between the private sector, also the startups themselves taking parts on an executive board level, handling or building these kind of initiatives catered towards these startups. I think moving forward, this question goes also for you, for both of you, Faisal and Nasser. Where do you see Jordan on the ecosystem or the fintech ecosystem global map? So let me just put more to the question. What do you think are the emerging, or let's say in 2 years' time, what are the emerging technologies that we're seeing? Right now, we saw an amazing COVID response from the local ecosystem, from new ideas being generated, from the government tackling the COVID in a very niche way that it's currently sharing the knowledge with other countries on that kind of strategy and policy. We're looking at expanding, or the Central Bank of Jordan launching their, or the enhanced version of the current sandbox that they're having. We're looking at increase in investment in fintechs. So all of that being contributed, where do you see Jordan being positioned in the fintech ecosystem or the global fintech ecosystem?
If I may start, yeah, thank you. I think because of the COVID-19, which is really not that good, I mean, in terms of the impact on the economy and the impact on the health of the people, but from the fintech point of view, I think the impact is really positive, actually very positive. Now, currently, I was talking about the central bank and how much they were really positive in general, but today, like you said about Ministry of Digital Economy and Entrepreneurship, they are working today with the central bank and many other government entities in collaboration with the fintech startups, and they actually a few days ago they invited the key fintech players in the market, as they are planning to do tomorrow for, I mean, in the coming months, really to increase the adoption of let's say, or the financial inclusion, to increase the adoption of the e-payments in general, not only on the e-commerce side, it's also on the physical merchants to pay by mobile wallets, to pay by cards, to pay by any digital mean, not necessarily wallets, but in all types of products. And they have really very ambitious plans. It's not a secret because they already announced it a few days ago. For next year, they will try to shift or mandate as much as possible the e-payments across the whole country. I mean, private and government sectors. And this is really huge. This will give a room to all existing fintech startups, plus many new fintech startups. I know this is focused currently on the payment sector, but like my colleague Faisal said, it will open the door for more fintech products. Once you have more adoption for the customers to use really the digital products and digital payments, then you can introduce other products like remittances, installments, insurance products. So it's really actually the payments, as you can say, it's the infrastructure for the other products. And the government is really going towards pushing or mandating this across all sectors. So there's really a great room for fintech startups in the coming year.
So, Faisal, any remarks?
Yeah, just as Nasser was saying, I think, you know, as the market matures and customers matures, we're going to see more sophisticated fintech solutions if they're in the space of wealth management, robo advisors, and so on. And I think as well, by looking at the increase of funding, especially from what's coming in from the ISSF, we're going to see more first-time funds being established and direct investments. And that is going to ample more growth of fintech innovation as a whole. I think my perspective would be when I look at Jordan, Jordan has been well positioned as the kitchen for the region. And I think that's an area that we need to invest much more in. We need to invest in more emerging technologies and really upskill our upskill people in Jordan in order to attract larger companies with headquarters to open their kitchens here, from fintechs in the UAE, fintechs in Egypt, and so on. But I think the B2B space is something that I believe will play quite a good role in terms of if it's in fintech or insurtech, where a lot of startups will help banks and insurance companies really accelerate their digitization. And lastly, I think one thing that we're going to start seeing a more tremendous growth is embedded fintech, which is in nature not in fintech. They start as marketplaces, they start at consumer products, and then they go forward in embedding fintech. So these could be your examples of accounting services, right? Where it's an accounting service for an SME, but then they start embedding a cash flow, an instant loan product. Or it could be your marketplace that sells different types of products and then introduces a buy now, pay later payments function. So I think that's something that we're seeing globally. And I think we're going to start seeing it here. And we're starting to see it not just in Jordan, but in the region. And a good example is Careem. Look at Careem. Careem is a ride-hailing app. Slowly now they've moved into the payments app. Now it's becoming a super app. Soon you're going to start seeing more financial products being embedded into that solution.
Yeah, 100%. No, I 100% agree with both sides. One thing I'd like to also focus on is because of what Jordan has to offer, and this is just before going to the questions, but because I do have to see, I'm seeing a couple of very interesting questions that will be directed to both of you. One is definitely more towards the FDI, the foreign direct investments that would be funneling into the market, seeking the market's talent, technical expertise, the investment opportunities available, and of course, the last bit goes more towards the regulations. And I think that will not take place before, again, seeing a regulations enhancements. That one thing I'd like to pinpoint. The other bit of it, again, is opening down the floors and then further collaboration within the ecosystem. We'll definitely started to see more hackathons and accelerators coming into the market. That looks either at one, it could be a certain case study or areas of focus for the partners within the accelerators. The second part, it looks at more towards specific areas of focus, tackling the minorities, the financial inclusion, women empowerment, even enabling technology and innovation within also the refugees and the minorities within the market. Another bit that I'm also seeing that there will be another traction of it is the further education in fintech. And this is something we're currently seeing be implemented within universities. We're also looking at having international courses, or for example, from what I know right now, you have Al Hussein Technical University looking at the deep tech, for example. So these kind of emerging technologies will also come into the market, again, enabling the innovation or creating new ideas from the local market, what could be also potentially, again, attracting international ideas coming to the market. So just before wrapping up and the final thoughts, I'd like to just go ahead with the questions and not prolong anymore. So you have one question goes to, I'd probably say Engineer Nasser, because this is in your field. So what is your advice for someone who wants to start a career in fintech, basically? Now, a career can go both ways, either taking part of your own startup idea or joining an existing, so either the entrepreneurship track or the intrapreneurship, where you develop something in fintech for your own organization. Engineer Nasser, what do you think about it?
My general advice, like you exactly mentioned, if you want to be an entrepreneur, go ahead. I mean, this is the best time. I mean, the ecosystem is really great and it is very helpful. But if you feel that you need some more knowledge, I don't advise you to go and take training courses. Just join a fintech startup because this is the best way really to learn. I mean, if you join a big corporate, this is good, but this is for your career, long-term career. If you are planning to open your own business, the best place is really to join startups. I remember MadfoatCom when we started in 2011, we faced really a big challenge when it comes to hiring good resources or good people, because they were always afraid, really, or hesitated to join a startup company. Luckily today, it's changing, like my colleague Faisal mentioned, because of the success stories that happened with Kareem, Maktoub. The new generation started to believe that working with a startup might be a very good opportunity. So just in summary, my advice is really join a startup and learn as much as you can, then plan to open your own startup if you feel you have a good idea that you believe in.
Okay. Another question and goes to Faisal Al Bitar. What do you think is the biggest threat for fintech growth in Jordan?
So as we said, I mean, regulation is an enabler, but as well, no progressive regulation is a threat to the ecosystem. And again, going back to the examples of, if you look at Europe, open banking was really driven by the regulator. And that really opened new innovations, new companies like the N26 out there. So I firmly believe that the regulator needs to play a progressive role and needs to accelerate going forward. So far, we've seen tremendous support on all levels, if it's from the startups, with the banking industry as well. But again, taking the example of the black swan and how fast things are moving and how fast we're accelerating, regulators need to play that role and need to be progressive and accelerating and really adapting what are the new norms of our consumers, what are the new norms of businesses, and where the economy is heading. So I think that probably could be the single biggest threat ahead, but as well, it is the enabler for an industry like this to grow going forward.
If you allow me just to add one point to what Faisal mentioned, and going back to the role of the associations, I think the associations in Jordan are playing a very good role currently, and we need them really to increase that role and making sure that the regulations are with the fintech, not against it, and also that it's progressing in a very quick manner. Things are really changing every day. For example, you have Intaj, you have GIA, you have Endeavor, many really organizations that I'm part of, some of them are really meeting with the regulators to ensure at least there is no surprises for the fintech companies. You don't want to start a business and then find a new regulation that might really be a showstopper to you. But also from the other point of view, you want to ensure that the regulations are really adapting quickly what's happening in the market. So I think the role of the associations here is very, very important.
Excellent. I got two more questions, and then we'd be happy to wrap up today's session. A question from Nadal Al Bitar. Nadal, thank you for joining the session. Nadal is asking a question related to the feedback of Nasser and Faisal about how regulations are supporting or not supporting fintech in your opinion. So where do you think the end of basically a regulator support to a fintech? So I can just go ahead, maybe answer the question on more of a regional aspect and then leave the floor for you guys to talk more about what's going on in Jordan. So basically the role of regulator is always to ensure the no infringement happening in any process related to fintechs, whether it was in payments, in basically the compliance of the technology itself or the company, or even to the smallest fragment. And what we see the traction of it right now is the crypto assets. From what we see on a traditional, on a regional trend, regulators are not trying to disable, but enable technologies. However, due to the technicalities and underwriting the policies, yes, that might take some time. That could also been justified in a rationale that they name, or in a regulatory framework called the sandbox, hence the duration of a typical sandbox from 9 to 12 months. Now, it completely depends on the technology itself or the market opportunity and the appetite of a regulator of it and the appetite of it in the market. And that's what we started seeing. I can reflect a lot of it from Bahrain. So Bahrain initially started with the first cloud data policy, again, moved forward all the way now to them licensing crypto asset license and under 4 category, allowing for crypto exchanges or crypto house and the start of crypto companies locally in Bahrain. Same thing we started to see with the DAIFC and ADGM right now. So in that perspective, for technologies that within the core focus of the central bank, yes, they are supporting. However, I do firmly believe in some technologies that not necessarily required to be regulated, but under some umbrellas of central banks, some school of thought still believe in wanting to regulate them. An example that can I bring up is the transformation within the blockchain technology. I'll leave it to you for Faisal and Engineer Nasser to elaborate more on the question and basically on how regulators are supporting or not supporting fintechs from a Jordan angle.
Yeah, so I think from supporting, I mean, it was well mentioned on today's call. There are different initiatives, like you mentioned, Faisal, if it's on the sandbox, as well as, like as Nasser mentioned, the new payment infrastructure. If we look at Click in particular, the new payment infrastructure, this will enable new innovation to be built on that platform. So that is really really a support for the ecosystem that we require. I think, again, the things that are not being supportive is the gaps that are there. It's where we need more direction on where cloud is heading. We need more direction on emerging technologies. As you mentioned, Faisal, I think crypto and blockchain are areas that as well that we need more clarity and more regulation in terms of where we're going. Because again, these emerging technologies are coming. And that's why we need to start thinking about how do we put the legislation there? How do we set the right environment that is as well safeguards the customers and the risk of the market? So I think and from my perspective, it's really looking at the gaps, and the gaps more related to the emerging technologies and how do we proceed on really filling in these gaps and starting looking more further into launching solutions into those technology verticals.
Also from my point of view, like you said, Faisal, regulations are always important to protect the customer's rights. But the challenge can be in over-regulating things or sometimes putting certain regulations that might affect the commercial side of the business. So I think the government in general needs to hear more from the fintech players, and not necessarily the corporates. I mean, they need to hear from the well-established corporates, the new startups, all levels of startups and fintech players, to ensure when they put the regulations that they balance, let's say, the protection with the what do you call it, the commercial side. Because sometimes if I'm a startup or a fintech company and I have a lot of regulations that will make my cost much higher than really the revenue that I will receive, so it will be a losing business, I will not start this business. So you need to have this balance. In general, in Jordan, this is happening. I mean, getting the feedback from the sector, but I think we need more, and we need really, they need, I mean, the government to hear more from the fintech startups before they put any new regulation.
Yeah, and I think just one more adding to that, and going back to the sandbox, I think the sandbox is a great initiative where, it's safeguarded, it enables a startup to really test their solution. But I think what needs to be there, more clarity, is post-graduation. So after the sandbox has actually graduated from the program, what happens going forward? And what's the time to the market? And that's critical because, as Nasser was saying, I mean, startups are really, what they lack is the resources and time. So it's important that post-graduation, there's a clear roadmap for implementation, that the startup has clarity in terms of after they've graduated, entering the market, what is the time to market? What are the legislations that are going to put there? And what are the subsidies that are going to be imperative as well in order to operate? Because the sandbox is more of an exemption per se in terms of any type of regulation. So that's important, looking at as well post-graduation, having a clear timeline and a roadmap of what happens after.
Excellent. So more of, we can also look at it from a different angle, whereby instead of an exemption, the applicants, or actually the startups in the sandbox, are building their policies before they graduate. So when they graduate, they already have their existing license ready, and then their market ready to go ahead. And then on the other perspective of it, we really need to look at it from a strategic point of view, is not just the regulations, but also what is the exit strategy from the sandbox. So what are the market opportunities available, how they can connect to the market. And then of course, that always happens through the support from the private sector and what we have from the existing associations that are looking to empower or to assist the startups. We are running out of time, but we also have one more question, which is from Rawan. Rawan is asking how to join a fintech program. Now, there are many programs in the market from from incubators and accelerators and associations. None of them are necessarily tying in or fintech programs focus. However, please do stay tuned and keep posted from what the organizations are offering to support startups. You can also, hopefully in time, as Jordan Fintech Bay, we will start launching our dedicated fintech programs and accelerating and incubating ideas in collaboration, of course, with our partner network. Any final thoughts or remarks, gentlemen, before ending the session?
Just a small advice to anyone who's really interested in the fintech space, especially entrepreneurs with new ideas. This is really the right time. Don't hesitate, just start a business. You are really lucky, you have very good supportive banks, telecom companies, associations in the market. This is the right time really, especially because of the COVID. I think we are moving into the digitization and payments and everything, not only payments, in the coming years. So this is the right time for any fintech startup or entrepreneur. Thank you.
Maybe just from the other side, if there are any gray-headed fintech or financial industry experts, there's a lot of bright ideas out there, a lot of entrepreneurs with great startups that are looking for experts to join and help them grow their startups. So I think that's also is an opportunity for you to join really emerging fintechs that are really reshaping the financial industry space.
Yeah. So again, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure and an honor to have you both in our inaugural session.
Thank you.
Webinar series FinTalks. Of course, hopefully this is one of many upcoming sessions live from Jordan as Jordan Fintech Bay. Again, thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you for your questions. And please stay tuned for our upcoming session with hopefully new different speakers. Could be the same ones coming in again, but for sure is a different or new topic that could be an interest. Thank you everyone for joining. Wishing you all a good day, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.